Hello, so we'll have a look at this game where Black eventually won without many difficulties, but as we will see, he could have gotten in a lot more trouble, and it's all related to development of the pieces. So let's have a look. So the game started as some kind of Vienna game with f4, and Black played simply d6, then developed his bishop. So far everything is quite fine, and now White played knight a4 to try to take the bishop pair. So now Black decided to provoke some kind of queenside expansion instead of just giving up the bishop. But this doesn't really make sense since expanding on the queenside is one of White's plans anyway in these positions. So here Black should probably just castle or take here and aim to play d5 at some point. If White takes the bishop, then this isn't much of a problem since even though he lost the dark squared bishop, he has all of his pawns on dark squares. This bishop isn't terribly useful, so black can be quite fine. For example, like this, we can take, play knight d4, and black has enough counterplay. There's not real problems for him. Instead, black decides to violate one of the opening principles and move around his pieces for a second and third and fourth time in the opening, which doesn't usually result in good things. So bishop goes to b6, and this really didn't really make much sense since the bishop was here, now it's here, it's on the same diagonal. White can take it still, so that wasn't really solved. Opening the a file isn't terribly useful since a3, a2 isn't really much of a weakness for white. White should probably not play b5, giving up some squares, but just play h3 probably, provoke the capture. Next he can take, play bishop e3, maybe a4 at some point, and white has some advantage due to the free space that he got with 10b. Instead black played b5, which also makes some sense to attack the knight. And the e5 pawn isn't hanging, so that's not a problem. And now black just has to decide what to do with the knight, as we can establish that the knight has to move. Somehow black decided on the most passive square, which doesn't really make much sense. So where should he go? Well, again, in the opening, development and time is incredibly important. So even though maybe we would in theory like the knight to go to c5, which is of course kind of a weak square, we have to consider whether we have time for such maneuvers. And usually in the opening, moving around the same piece 3 or 4 times doesn't really work. This is one of the main principles of opening play. So here black has to go to a5. The knight on the rim isn't very dim, he is attacking the bishop. So in the worst case scenario he can take there. And some complications might follow. For example here, black can take on c4, white can take on f6. If he takes here, then his position is just not very good. The bishop is not stuck, and e4 is also hanging. For example, the main line would be this, the knight e5, here. And of course this is a little bit complicated. White is for the moment 2 pawns up, but at the same time black has quite good development. He can castle queenside eventually, and there will be some weaknesses around the white king. Queen h4 might be an issue, so there is counterplay. Of course this isn't necessary. After this we can also take on f3 and play similarly, or de. This is also quite fine for black. Knight e7 also would make sense, but in this case it seems that there is a pretty simple tactic with bishop takes f7. So knight b8 was played. White decided to take the knight, which is fine, but there's no reason to do this now. White can probably try and use his lead in development by simply capturing stuff. For example, here, bishop f7, and black should basically resign, as he is so undeveloped, his pieces are not coordinated, and this typical tactic works out quite well, like this. So of course this was possible to calculate, but we can also reason it out, that we cannot just go back and hope that everything is okay. We have to calculate. If we violate opening principles, we have to have a good reason to do that. We cannot just do it anytime. So here, he took here, and he decided to castle. Again, this is quite a familiar tactic. White should know this. Bishop f7 with knight takes e5. Well, black eventually castled. a4 seems like a waste of a move. Again, something like this should be played. Maybe h3 to provoke the capture. Maybe queen b3 to get out of the pin. And white has some initiative. And you might ask why. Well, it's all about the undeveloped knight. If it was on a5, we could have just taken the bishop and we wouldn't have many problems. Now a4. Eventually the knight is out. Here, white basically blunders his pawn, and of course sometimes we can sacrifice this pawn and get it back later, like in the king's gambit, but it's not always the case. Also, now that a4 is played, it's a bit of a weakness. So queen d2 was played, and from here black played quite well. There's not much bad things to say about black's position and about black's play. He has a pawn advantage, and he decided to transform his advantage into something else, which is a big structural advantage, while also taking the pawn. Even if he wouldn't take the pawn right now, white's position is way too weak to survive. And also this bishop is completely irrelevant to the position. So from here, black basically just mopped everything up. Not too much happened. Here, I'm not sure if black blundered this or just calculated that taking on f6 doesn't really work out. But either way, I'm not sure why this was necessary. Maybe we can just put the queen on e7 instead. But okay, this does work, because after here, as mentioned in the comment, well, this is checkmate, queen e2. And here, black gets the bishop back, with queen ending with 4 pawns up. And it's good that the queen is on g3, as otherwise it would be checkmate here, but it's not. Here we just have to not get mated. g6 was played. I would consider maybe this to not allow a single check, but it doesn't matter too much. And next, white just gave away his queen. So in this game, black played the opening kind of not very accurately. He thought he had time to maneuver everything, but we have to keep in mind that our opponent is also playing, and he should be interested in using his lead in development. For example, here, this is quite a simple tactic that has to be found. If we want to improve in our chess, we have to consciously look for forcing moves all the time. And this will just end the game on the spot. Thanks.